Always keep in mind that chess is apples and oranges. You accept an advantage in one area, but may suffer a disadvantage in another area. For example, the Sicilian Lasker Pelican variation is a sharp and aggressive, highly theoretical position for black, enabling him to challenge the center immediately with e5, resulting in a backward d pawn and a hold on d5, which he must defend. If black plays knight f6 here, you want to play your other knight on b1 to c3 in order to defend the pawn. Please excuse me if I mispronounce the term Veshnikov or Seshnikov. This move, bishop f4, provokes black to play the pawn to e5, which is a very committal move. After which, you play the bishop to g5 to pin the knight. The key difference between this variation and the variation with d6 is the move pawn to b5. And now you're in a Seshnikov as if you were never in a Taimanov Sicilian at all. In this position, you definitely want to capture the knight on f6 because the f6 knight was a very good piece for black. And the dark square bishop for black is nowhere near as good as the knight was. So you capture the knight. Now at this point, white must choose between either pawn to c3 or pawn to c4. Each come with their own benefits and game plans. c3 is a bit more positional and restricts queenside mobility for black, whereas c4 is more dynamic and pressing, giving white more active play, but also giving black more counterplay on the queen side. e4, c5, knight f3, e6, and after d4 we capture, knight recaptures, followed by knight c6. And after this move, the typical move for white is knight to b5, threatening to go to d6. Here in this variation, black plays the pawn to h6. Now this is not so much a tempo move for black, because after this, moving the king is awful in this position, and black will have no other choice other than to give up the dark square bishop and leaving black with dark square weaknesses and no dark square bishop. But let's go back a couple of moves, or maybe a few moves, and instead of playing the pawn to a6, black plays the bishop to c5. And now we're into the Sicilian Cobra variation. So after playing the bishop to c5, which aims at white's weakest square on the board, the f2 pawn. So even after d6, which is the normal continuation, now king e7. And after bishop f4, queen to b6 now. Black has a battery on the a7 to g1 diagonal. Knight d2, and now the Cobra strikes. Bishop takes f2 check. But playing the pawn to a6, knight d6 check, bishop takes, queen takes. Here people will either play knight f6 or queen e7. If they play queen e7, I actually prefer to trade queens and try to continue, try to win with the bishop pair. So, queen e7. But if knight f6 instead, then knight c3, and after b5, white can then consider developing the dark square bishop on c1, and then consider long castling for a very aggressive game. But after queen e7, queen trade on e7. Now here the only thing to watch out for is the knight hopping to b4, which will threaten knight takes c2, forking the king and rook. Okay, this is the line. e4, c5, knight f3, e6, followed by d4, and capture on d4, knight captures on d4, followed by the move, pawn to a6. And now, after pawn to a6, we're in the Sicilian Khan variation. And the typical follow-up for white, knight c3, and now pawn to b5. Now, this is scary, but it's not the end of the world. Black is going for immediate queenside pressure. So just stay principled and continue play. One of Black's biggest advantages is having a lot of queenside options, with most of them being fine. Logically, bishop to b7 should follow the pawn's advance to b5. No need to play fancy yet, just castle to safety and get ready to play solid. Castle. Now here's another annoying moment where black can play knight c6, queen c7, queen to b6, or even d6, knight e7, bishop to c5, and pawn to b4. You should exchange the knight if black plays the knight to c6. Then follow up with bringing your rook to the center to stay solid. If b4, on the other hand, the top engine move is knight a4. But following the engine's recommendation leads to very complicated play, which is unnatural. Now, knight back to b1 is barely worse than knight a4, but it carries the benefit of having easier play. There is also the move knight on c to e2, but the computer will give black the advantage, so weigh your options carefully. I recommend knight back to b1. Now, should they play the knight to c6 again, as I stated before, then go ahead and trade off the knight, considering the fact that black will need to bring more pieces out to get anything done. And in this position, just consider rerouting your knight and securing your victory. So back to the game with knight c6, you should exchange, then play the rook to e1. Knight takes e6, bishop c6, and now rook e1. And the top computer move is queen b8. If you get to this point, then the move for white is pawn to a4. Black now has to choose between pawn captures on a4 or just advance the pawn to b4 further. Both moves lead to savage responses for white. For example, pawn to b4. Now for a very classy move, taking advantage of black's uncastled king, is knight to d5. You're looking for the right moment to play bishop f4, attacking black's awkwardly placed queen and threatening knight c7 check, picking up the rook. Bishop d6. This is black's best try to stop bishop f4, but you just respond with pawn to h3 and carry on. Now here, knight e7 or knight f6 are the best responses for black. No matter what, do not trade your knight. It is the best piece so far in the position. But we're going to take a look at knight e7 first. Knight e7, then the move here is queen g4, knight g6, bishop e3. Here the computer wants black to play bishop h2 check. But castling is the human move. So we're going to look at that. Your goal should be to get your knight to b6 in order to pressure black's rook on a8. So after castling, knight b6. Either way, if you get here, you should be good. But in the game, the move played by black is knight f6. So after knight f6, queen to f3. And if pawn captures the knight, then white will recapture on d5 and you will pick up the bishop on c6. Otherwise, bishop captures, pawn recaptures. Perhaps black will castle in this position. But if bishop takes on d5, you recapture. Black castles, then pawn captures on e6. So either way, you should be good. And then you just follow up with further development. Okay, thanks for watching. That is all I have for now. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned.